I can't do that. I don't dare take a risk. I'm afraid to try that. I can't imagine what else I would be doing. I don't really want to go to that party, but I feel obligated. Living very small lives and letting their limiting beliefs really control the way that they live and behave.
The first myth that people who have imposter syndrome believe is that it's a personal flaw and it's just them. Nobody else, because nobody else seems to have it, it's just them. And for that reason, they keep it a secret.
The fear of being found out makes us small, makes us invisible, leads us to the wrong decisions, fight or flight. The fear of being found out is caused by voices from the past, by wisdom from the past.
Welcome everybody to the Imposter Syndrome Summit. This is the interview for the 11th of June 2023. I am your Imposter Syndrome coach, Mary Medley. Yesterday we spoke to the amazing Lauren Valbert, and today we are excited to have yet another expert with us. So let me introduce her. Tara Halliday is an Imposter Syndrome specialist. She guides high-achieving leaders to eliminate imposter syndrome and develop energy, focus, calm resilience, and effortless confidence. She has a PhD in engineering and over 20 years experience as a qualified holistic therapist and certified coach. Tara brings a practical and scientific approach to helping high performers reach their highest potential. She is the author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, Unmasking, The Coach's Guide to Imposter Syndrome, and has another book due out in the summer of 2023. I hope she tells us something about that. Her mission and passion are to free high achievers and leaders from unnecessary internal suffering so they can live happy, meaningful, successful lives. So Tara, welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Summit. I hope there's nothing I have forgotten.
No, that sounds great. Thank you very much for having me. This is great to be here.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise. So we'll go on straight to the questions. Tell us your story on how you have experienced imposter syndrome and if you beat it.
So my experience of imposter syndrome, I didn't realize at the time was imposter syndrome. And I think this is pretty common with people. Now, when I experienced it was when I graduated from university and I applied for a job with this big international company, General Electric, to go into their graduate training program. And of course, in the course of the interviewing, they gave me a personality profile. And from that, they came back and they said, we don't want to offer you a graduate trainee position. Your personality profile is quite rare. We see it in our top leaders. So we want to offer you a fast track management position. And I just froze. That's not what I wanted. No, this was the fear of if I get put forward, put like on a pedestal so high expectations, I can only fail. It was an invitation to failure. And so I declined. I said, no, I'm not interested. I didn't realize this was the fear at the time. At the time I said, oh, that sounds boring, management. And I actually went back to university and I studied for my PhD. So even though the route was me getting a PhD and having a 10-year career in engineering, that actually was avoiding the opportunity, which is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. And I had no idea that that was imposter syndrome. And when I first started working with imposter syndrome and I started doing all the research and looking into the academic studies and interviewing people, I realized that one of the behaviors is turning down or avoiding opportunities like that come up. And that is imposter syndrome. So I didn't At the time, I just ran away from it and ran away from, you know, who knows what kind of career in this large company. It came back when I found myself again in a leadership position. So in that sense, there was nothing that I did to get me over imposter syndrome per se. But years later, I did a coaching program that was specifically designed to change what turns out to be the root cause of imposter syndrome. And I got rid of imposter syndrome by tackling the root cause rather than the symptoms. And it was only later that I realized what I'd done and how I'd eliminated the root cause of it.
So you've spoken about the root cause of imposter syndrome. What is, in your opinion, the root cause, and is it specific to each person, or is there a general list of root causes?
Right. So there is one root cause of imposter syndrome. So there are the symptoms that people see, right? There's 3 symptoms that people see. The imposter syndrome thinking, which is the self-doubt, the physical stress it causes, we go into fight, flight, and freeze states, we get anxiety, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome behaviors like procrastinating, perfectionism, and like I did, avoiding opportunities. And there's 8 or 9 of those. So these are the root causes. This is what everyone sees and perceives as imposter syndrome. The root cause of it was actually identified back in the 1950s by the grandfather of psychology, Dr. Carl Rogers. He was looking for what causes people to be unhappy. Why aren't people happy? How can we help people be happy and free from suffering? So he looked at the thousands of cases that he'd dealt with and his trainees had dealt with. And he actually found the answer. He found the answer is a belief, an unconscious belief, which is why people don't see it. They just see the symptoms. An unconscious belief that your worth as a person depends on what you do, that your worth is conditional. That is, you do something good, you are good. You do something bad, you are bad. And that he identified as the root cause of all human suffering. Now, fast forward to the 1978, imposter syndrome was discovered, and nobody really knew what to do with it because people were still looking at the symptoms. The way I came to join the dots is that coaching work that I mentioned that I did was one that was specifically designed to take people from conditional worth to unconditional worth. And I went through that program myself. I changed it for myself, and it was so transformational, so impactful. I thought I had to share it. So I trained as a coach. So that's my coaching qualification then, specifically around conditional worth. Then in 2016, I think it was, one of my clients, my coaching clients for that work said, have you heard of imposter syndrome? So I looked into imposter syndrome, and that's when it was very clear to me that all of the symptoms of imposter syndrome and the root cause of it, feeling not quite good enough, even though you're successful, matched exactly with the symptoms of a belief in conditional worth. And it was very, very clear from the work that I'd done that you change the belief in conditional worth and the imposter syndrome just dissipates. It dissipates into the air.
I love that you said even though you went through it, you only discovered years later, which tells me that many of the times we are coaching ourselves or we are coaching our former self, and then you realize what it is, and then you are able to help people because you went through it. So I think that that's a very powerful thing. So what led you to write your book? Is it your book, Unmasking a Coach's Guide to Imposter Syndrome? Was it for you an opportunity to share the information? Did you feel like the information is all up in the air? It's not clear. What made you write this book?
I think there is a lot of lack of clarity, particularly when we look around the internet as we're propagating ideas, because people see the symptoms And because the cause is unconscious, then a lot of people are trying to address the symptoms, and it doesn't work. It helps a little bit to manage the symptoms, but it doesn't get rid of it. And because of that, there's even become this belief, this myth, if you like, that imposter syndrome can't get rid of it, and you just have to suffer it, and you just have to put up with it and do the best you can. And that's not the case. So the reason I wrote Unmasking, I actually had a debate with my publisher. They said, well, why don't you write the book about imposter syndrome for everyone, so it will help individuals by themselves? And I saw the work that I was doing, and I thought, no, it needs to be just more than me helping other people. It has to be other people. We have to spread this out. So I wrote the book as the coach's guide to imposter syndrome, to help coaches help their clients. And that way, the more I could help coaches help their clients, the more people will be helped. So that's essentially it. It was purely the scale and impact that empowering coaches to help others would have.
In your book, you've talked about the conditional worth that children are conditioned to. In my own coaching, I've referred to this as the established authority that you're born into. You don't choose your parents. Here they are. You have your parents, you have your teachers, you have people you look up to. And so they condition you to their way of thinking or their way of life. What is the role of this established authority in triggering imposter syndrome?
So there's a few questions in there in terms of triggering imposter syndrome. So
Yes.
the root cause of imposter syndrome, as I said, is this belief in conditional worth. The reason we believe in conditional worth, as you said, with established authority, this is what we get taught, right? The whole society, and this is all societies all over the world, they all teach their children that your worth depends on what you do. So you do something good as a kid, you get told good girl, or good boy, or bad, you get told bad girl, boy. And that is that linking of actions and worth. They're put together, and it's automatically done. The reason it's automatically done is because everyone believes that belief. So your parents, my parents, were never taught any differently. If they knew about conditional worth, then they would have taught that. They didn't. And so there's another part to it, and this is generations, why? But why is it so prevalent? And the reason is because where this belief comes from, it's not just that we're taught it. So when a baby's born, we get all the information coming into their brain from all the senses. When a baby's first born, it's just information. It has no context. There's no structure. They can see, but they can't perceive. They can't understand, differentiate anything. And as their brains begin to develop, they begin to, things like recognize faces. They can start to pick out things, and the brain starts to sort everything out. Between 18 months and 3 years old, a child learns that it's separate. So all this information that it has, it separates out, I'm a different physical body from everything around me. I am a different person from everyone around me. So they develop a sense of I. And at this point, it would be the natural place for a child to not only separate their sense of physical self from the rest of the world, but separate their sense of their worth as a person from what they do. Unfortunately, because the belief of the whole society is the same, we never get through that developmental stage, if you like. So the belief in conditional worth isn't because of any particular events in your childhood. It isn't because of, it's not that your parents are to blame. They didn't know. How could they know? Because they weren't taught and their parents weren't taught. So, and the reason it's so hard to see is because it's unconscious. So that's all the reasoning for us developing the belief about imposter syndrome. And then the triggering of imposter syndrome usually happens when people are trying to do something a little bigger. than they've done before. And they get into this self-doubt. That's the triggers are then the experiences. So maybe there's a teacher who told you that you'll never be good enough, right? Or there's a parent who, when you've got 7 A's and a B, just focused on the B grade, right? So those kind of things then play out. And so imposter syndrome comes and goes through your adult life, and usually when you've got a situation of high challenge and low support.
High challenge and low support. That's an amazing way to put it, actually. So, can parents raise children who don't develop imposter syndrome, and how, if it's possible?
Okay, not everybody develops imposter syndrome. So I'm not somebody who says everybody has it. It affects about 70% of people recognize it, notice it, experience it. Some of the people who don't recognize it, either they don't see it or they're managing it and they don't even realize they're managing it. Okay, so not everyone gets imposter syndrome, but I'll take the question a little deeper. Can you raise a child without that underlying belief that your worth is conditional? Right? And
Yeah.
that is possible, right? There are some children who have this extraordinarily lucky childhood that at least one, or if not both, and it only has to be one of their parents or guardians, were able to bring them up believing that their worth and their actions are separate. Now, there's Dr. Greg Bear, who's an expert in this area in the USA, and he's found that maybe 5 people in 10,000 get this, lottery, winning the lottery childhood, if you like.
Yeah.
So those are the ones who are kind of by just a blessing, right? Pure luck. But it is possible to bring your child up with the belief that their worth is unconditional. And I see it all the time from the people, and that was the coaching work I used to do with people. I'd help them develop their own unconditional worth, and then they could teach it to their children. And so that was the gift that they would pass on. So it's absolutely possible. The way to do it is to tackle the root cause. Otherwise, you're always going to teach, even unconsciously, that belief in conditional worth. It's always going to reinforce things.
Okay. So, in your book, you also discuss emotional addictions and approval, power. These are the examples. How does a coach know that a client's emotional addiction can be solved within the coaching parameters as opposed to needing clinical therapy or clinical psychology?
Okay, this is a very good point. So the if you like, the psychotherapy and the clinical work takes people from mental dysfunction or mental illness, and they work with them to get to a point of normal functioning. And normal functioning is when they can operate during their day and they can love themselves and they're not overwhelmed by things, and they can. Now, imposter syndrome is considered normal functioning. And in fact, conditional worth is considered normal functioning. So there is no need for the therapy for that, and in fact, it's not appropriate for it. It's not, although these are, I call them survival strategies. These ways of acting when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling anxious, and some automatic ways that you behave. It's simply a habit. And this is the work that I do to get rid of imposter syndrome, is we change that way of responding to the world in an automatic way. So we don't go for, and the 5 of them, there's praise and approval, power, drama, a distraction, and safety. So those are the 5 things that people go for. So they're not so severe that would need psychotherapy, and so they can be they can be resolved in a coaching environment. But I would say it's not a standard coaching environment. It's what some people call a deep coaching environment, because we go a little bit deeper into people's whole lives and emotional lives.
Okay. So you have coached leaders at different levels. So who is most likely to suffer from imposter syndrome between men and women in your experience?
Well, it's not just so there's several things here. So if we look at the root cause of imposter syndrome, it's that conditional worth, there is no gender bias there, right? So we would expect to see no gender bias when we look at imposter syndrome. Now, when the original research was done in 1978 by Clance and Imes, they studied female graduate students. And for about 15 years after that, all the other academic studies seem to show that women experienced it more than men. So the conclusion was, it's a woman's issue. It's something to do with being a woman. But in the mid-1990s, Susan Buchhalter did some research where she made the survey that people do completely anonymous. Right, so there's no way that anyone would have been able to tell the gender. It was completely confidential, and under those conditions, the survey showed that men and women experienced it equally. Right, so we've got the root cause, gender neutral. With the right survey, it's gender neutral, and in fact, the other surveys that showed it's just women are more capturing a cultural issue that men have less permission to express what they perceive to be weakness or a flaw. So, but when in a completely confidential environment, they're free to do so, and it's equal. And then the third point is that in my work with leaders, my clients are about 2/3 men and 1/3 women, and that reflects the same demographic, if you like, of the numbers of male and female leaders, especially in the Western world. So there's absolutely no difference in gender at all from the root cause, from the research, and my personal experience.
I've spoken to someone whose idea is that it mostly affects women because of the cultural system. Women are conditioned to be servers, nurturers, take mothers, very mothering, and that's the expectation. So if you are a mom and you're pursuing a career, whether it's in management or you're trying to grow your career or you're planning to start a business that might take you away from the home situation, then you're seen as not being a good mother. And you always have to work with that in mind. And that ends up triggering the feelings of imposter syndrome and some of the addictions, emotional addictions that you're mentioning. What's your view on that? The system, especially the system of life that is very masculine.
Yes, I would say I completely disagree with that. Completely disagree with that. We see imposter syndrome in women who have no intention of becoming mothers for their own reasons, right? So it's not their expectation or being torn between they having to make this choice between the career and the home. And I think what's going on here is that when there's some kind of pain, if you like, then the brain starts looking for what's the cause of this, and it looks in a very narrow field, and they say, and you see, oh, I've got this expectation of being a good mother, and I've got this desire to have a good career. That must be the cause of it, but it's not. I see people who are, say, completely, almost identical. So you could say, they have the same profile as all the rest of their peers. So say they're a male of a particular age, well, then they're feeling this imposter syndrome, this discomfort, and then they'll say, well, what's the difference? Well, maybe it was my background, right? Maybe it was because I went to this one school and everyone else went to the other. Maybe it was my wealth background. Maybe it was the area that I come from. Maybe it's my accent. You see, people are trying to figure out, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like I'm still not quite good enough, despite doing well, and despite being successful? And so what I'd say is that that's people, their brains are looking for answers. And the reason their brains are looking for answers is they don't see the root cause being conditional worth, because it is unconscious, because we're not aware of it. Most people don't see it. It's the fish swimming in the water. They're not aware of the water. We're not aware of the conditional worth. So we try and see if we can find a pattern. Yes, absolutely gender neutral and completely.
Okay. So tell us about your coaching programs and your upcoming book, and how people can reach you if they want to have your service of coaching.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have a few things. First, I have a free quiz that people can take to see what impact imposter syndrome is having on them. And then I have an online course that people can work through. It's a personal, private online course to try and manage the symptoms of imposter syndrome, because there's quite a lot you can do to just dial it down and just make things a bit more comfortable, a bit more easy for you. Those are the low-hanging fruit. And then the third is my program, Inner Success, which is a one-to-one program, which takes anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. We go through a very systematic process. And what we're doing there is we're addressing the root cause of imposter syndrome. So we're changing conditional worth to unconditional worth. And the result of that is then that people feel that freedom, that effortless confidence. They forget to doubt themselves, and they relax a lot more. They feel happier and can go on without any barriers to do what they want to achieve. So to get in contact with me, you just go to outsmartimpostersyndrome.com, and you've got the three options there.
All right. Thank you so much. And for anyone watching, you can check the description of this video, because you're going to be sharing all of Tara's links, including the amazing giveaways that she's giving. So please make sure that you check it out and also leave a comment. So yesterday we spoke to Lauren Valbert, and she was yesterday's guest, and she has a question for you.
Okay.
What is the single most important new habit a person can adopt to help them with imposter syndrome?
That's a great question, because by implication, it's what's a quick and easy thing to do, right? And I would say that the easiest thing to do is look at comparing. So comparing is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. And in comparing, you're looking at the successful people around you, and you're seeing how successful they are, and you're feeling internally, self-conscious, self-critical, and doubting yourself. And so you feel like they're so much better than you. It feels like you don't belong. And that sense of isolation is a key part of the thinking and the feeling of imposter syndrome. Now, the process of comparing is not something you can just switch off, right? So your brain is always looking out for danger. That's part of your survival mechanisms. And when you look out for danger, you will naturally start comparing. Is this the same as it was yesterday, right? Or if it's the same as it was yesterday, then the brain doesn't need to worry about it because it's safe. So it's always looking for differences. And so when you're comparing yourself to everyone else, you're looking for the differences. So a single quick fix to just that little piece that you can do is, if you notice yourself looking for differences. Now, you can't stop yourself comparing. If you notice the differences, start looking for similarities instead. How am I the same as them? What shared experience? So rather than looking at the difference in gender, in education, in experience, in age, in whatever you like, right? Start looking at, how am I the same as that person? You can even make a list, and the more similarities that you can find with the people around you, your brain is going to register that you are like them. that you are, and it's going to register that you are safer and you're going to feel more like you belong. So it's a very, very, very quick way to feel at ease wherever you are.
I think that that's amazing advice. For anyone who is looking for Tara's book and wondering what it looks like, I just wanted to show this is the cover. So make
Thank
sure
you.
that you check the links in the description and in the first comment, and you'll be able to gain access to it. And it would be an amazing resource, especially for coaches who are working on imposter syndrome. So, Tara, we have a guest tomorrow,
Mhm.
Philip Goldberg. He is a spiritual counselor and author of very many books, including co authoring the book Get Out of Your Own Way, Overcoming Self-Defeating Behavior. He wrote that with Mark Goldstein. So what question would you like to ask him for tomorrow?
Well, I think an excellent question is actually the one you asked me right at the front, because it gives so many insights into people and their experience and knowledge. What is your experience of imposter syndrome personally?
What is Phil's experience of an imposter syndrome?
Exactly. Yes. Because I think it part of, with imposter syndrome, part of the problem is people keeping it a secret, right? So the more people who share their experience of it, the more it reinforces that idea that it's not just you. And this is actually, you mentioned my other book, Unmasking. I'm actually just finishing up my next book, which is called Outsmart Imposter Syndrome. And that's a book for individuals. So whereas my previous book was for coaches, this is for individuals who are experiencing imposter syndrome. And what I do there is I go through in detail the exact process that I use to get rid of imposter syndrome by getting rid of the belief in conditional worth. So step by step, I go through all the science behind it, because this is all heavily based in neuroscience and how the brain works. So I take through every part of that, and I think that's going to be a very exciting resource for people to look at. So that should be out. We're looking at towards the end of the summer now, so maybe August. So look out for it. That's Outsmart Imposter Syndrome.
Outsmart Imposter Syndrome coming out this August. So please make sure you check it out. I'm sure you're going to post it on your website or in some of the links we are going to share later.
Yes.
So we encourage people to check those ones out. Well, Tara, this has been such a joy. I personally have learned so much, and I want to say thank you for coming on and talking to us. Are there any final comments you would like to make?
Just thanks to you for putting this together. There's the secrecy that people have around imposter syndrome and the myths that there are around imposter syndrome. It's really important to bust through those myths and to educate people. So the work you're doing, putting this together, is valuable. So on behalf of all of your audience, who this is going to be excellent for, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
So to everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Make sure that if you have any more questions, even if they're for Tara, we can still address them later. So post them in the comments and ask. Make sure that you follow our pages. Check out my website, mindsetwithmary.com. There's amazing resources there. On my Facebook page at Coach Mary Medley, you're going to get a lot of free resources as well, handling and tackling imposter syndrome. And I hope that we'll see you for tomorrow's interview with the amazing Dr. Philip Goldberg. Thank you and have a great day.